This podcast is brought to you by Radio 786.
The Saudis have introduced this new operational framework known as the Nusuk, which introduces major changes on how, again, Hajj is administered. So what should government do in this regard, and how do we understand the role of Nusuk in the new dispensation of the administration of Hajj? Ambassador Ebrahim Rasool, who chaired the Ministerial Committee on the Efficient Management of the Annual Hajj and Umrah pilgrimages, he's now on the line with us. Ambassador, assalamu alaikum. Lovely to chat to you again. Welcome to Radio 786.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah to you and your listeners, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Immediately, your thoughts on Nusuk and whether you think it could work for South Africa.
Look, when we were the Ministerial Committee 2 years ago and we met with the Ministry of Hajj, the Director General and all the officials involved, we raised our concerns about the introduction of the Nusuk system because we were then in the midst of its application in North America and in Europe. And they were having enormous teething problems in communities which were technologically savvy, in which everyone had it. There was no interruption to Wi-Fi's, etc. The speeds were good, and people were generally fairly literate with technology. We raised a concern about too fast an application of such an online system in South Africa, given the age demographics that we're also dealing with here, as well as the already existing trend towards elitism in the Hajj, which would only favor the rich and the technologically enabled. And so that was our concern, and they agreed that we could continue with the system that we were busy with if we sorted out some of the issues within it in the lead up to it, and eventually bring in the Nusuk system gradually so that it operates like a hybrid with the existing system. And I think that that's what's now caught up with us, and it has something to do with our own slowness as government in the way in which they dealt with the report that we handed to them 2 years ago, as well as, I think, some ill-advised moves on the side of our Hajj administration within our community.
Yeah, let's talk about that because, we sit with a scenario that, SAUK interpreted what they believe to be certain changes that they will, act as this sort of super operator, which they're contesting. They're saying that's not what they're claiming. They're saying that there would have still been a role for operators to play, but they needed to submit some sort of a business plan, and all of this was explained to the operators. The operators naturally were peeved off about this because for them it's also a business at the end of the day. They went to the consulate and made a noise about it there, and the end result of which, of course, is now this dispensation that we're sitting with, which, by the way, raises a question about what their presence could be, because there isn't then going to be the role of an operator. They could apply to be guides, but again, that's conditional to whether the Nusuk system so does accept them. Also concerns about the support that SAUK could have previously provided, together with the cost of the packages. Do you think that this was a bit of a self-inflicted scenario in the Muslim community by those that work in the space of Hajj administration?
Look, I think that in any rise and fall of an empire or movement or organization, the question is always, if they fall, was it murder or suicide? I think that the Saudis always wanted to introduce a Nusuk system because they're changing Hajj from purely religious to a service industry as well. But I also think that there were elements of suicide. I think that there were operator overreach, but I do think that despite denials to the contrary, there was an attempt to use this moment to monopolize the role of regulator and operator. And I think that instead of having used this period constructively to be able to find a dispensation that balances out all the forces, and government should have adopted elements of our report in order to do so, because then it founded the harmony between SAWC as a regulator and the operators within a regulated system and an accountable system. But I think government missed that opportunity, and I think SAWC did not utilize this moment and spent it largely on a special general council in which they wanted to change their constitution to respond to this. And when all of that fell apart, I think we now sit with a situation that we are sitting with.
Who do you think is most disadvantaged here? Because, we've seen this Hajj lottery system as a different conversation. And then you now look at where we're at with this, where if I have internet, first of all, I can just easily go on there. If I'm literate, which I think I am, I can very easily just go and book there. If I have the funds in my bank account, I can put it in the digital wallet that's on the Nusuk app. And based on that first come, first serve, I'm Bob's uncle, I can go, right? Also, whether I've been there before, is of course not a condition, and depending on whether I meet the criteria based on the guys that are sitting behind the Nusuk app or the Nusuk website, and that gets to accept that, then I'm A for away. However, the concern here is that the Auntie Farida that's selling kusistas, every Sunday to be able to make her quantum to be able to undertake the Hajj would have ordinarily gone to the operator to say, book my place, here's my deposit, I've paid my SAWC registration fees, and up until the week where Auntie Farida still may be going, she's busy collecting the money and the final bits, to be able to undertake the Hajj, and, is saving up until the very last. That is unfortunately the nature of very many Hujjaj, many of whom, it is now worried will be losing out based on where, things are going with the administration of Hajj.
No, I think, Tashriq, you're absolutely right. It is the very old, the very poor that will be most affected. I think that the comment that you made at the beginning that refers to my comment about before people die, I think I'm responding to an idea that is circulating that Hajj is in any case a kind of a fard kifaya, that if some do it, others are absolved even when they just had the niyyah for it. I think everyone should have a fair shot at being able to go on Hajj. The demand will always exceed the supply, and now the supply has gone from 2,500 to 1,140. So the demand will always exceed the supply, but no one must be artificially disadvantaged from being able to go on Hajj by virtue of their class or even just their technological status. And that, unfortunately, is where we are sitting. And maybe I think that if we have a situation in which agents, for example, can make their money with the Umrah packages, then maybe they could be able to be converted into a facility in which they help those aunts. Otherwise, it will only be the elites who will be able to go on Hajj. And so maybe we must focus on finding the right packages, negotiating that with the Saudis for the very poor so that they are reserved out of the 1,140. Secondly, that we do have enablers or assistants who can help those very poor and those very frail and old in order that they are not further disadvantaged. And maybe what we should be able to do is then to see how those people can be assisted along the journey of Hajj, because now we have forfeited all the assistive devices and agencies that I think we had historically relied on to make the Hajj easy for us.
Yeah, this is what we now have, how to make the best of it, and also to lobby where the shortcomings are, to lobby for that to be improved. I think is then... Yeah, I don't know what the other option is, but this is what we now sit with. Ambassador Ebrahim Rasool, thank you very much for your time this morning. Ambassador Ebrahim Rasool chaired the Ministerial Committee on the Efficient Management of the Annual Hajj and Umrah pilgrimages.
This podcast is brought to you by Radio 786.